All right, welcome to the Podcast Playbook. This is the show that's here to help you launch, grow, and thrive in the world of podcasting. If you've ever thought about starting your own podcast but didn't know where to begin, or if you're already podcasting and want to take it to the next level, this is the place for you. I'm John W. Snyder, and today we're diving into why now is the perfect time to start your podcast and how it can transform your brand, your business, and your life. So this is a brand new podcast. This is what I'm doing. I want to be able to add value to you and help you, okay? I would also like to connect with you if you have questions about podcasting, about starting a podcast. You can find me on Instagram at John W. Snyder. You can find me on Twitter at John W. Snyder. And so those are the places we can connect. Obviously, with podcasting, it's kind of a lot like a radio show where I can't really interact with you unless I have guests on, which that is the goal. But so right now, it's kind of like I'm on a megaphone, bullhorn, just telling you things. But I want this to be a community for podcasters, for people who have thought about podcasting. And if you have podcasted or you have a podcast and you've quit, you've stopped doing it, this is also for you. And so I have a newsletter also. So the Podcast Playbook, I will put that link in the show notes so you can subscribe to the newsletter. It comes once a week, every Monday, and it's just going to have tips, links to different software, that kind of thing. So it's not intrusive. It's absolutely free. And like I said, I just want to help you start a podcast or continue and sustaining that growth of your current podcast. I also want to help you make money with your podcast. I want to help you gain more followers with your podcast. And so that's why I'm doing this. I have been podcasting and podcasted for the last 10 years, 12 years off and on. And so I know what I'm doing. I know that it's fun. I know that every business, every brand, every entrepreneur should have a podcast. And throughout this podcast and through this journey of the newsletter and social media and this show, I am going to explain and show you and tell you why you should have a podcast and how that can help your business grow, which then in turn helps you make more money. That is the goal, is to help you establish your goals, help you reach a grander audience, a bigger audience, and to help you make more money, right? And so in this episode that I am calling Why Start a Podcast, there's so many opportunities out there. And so there's four main things I'm going to discuss in this episode. The first one is the growing popularity of podcasting, the benefits of starting a podcast, overcoming common fears and misconceptions, and what to expect from this podcast, which I've kind of already explained, but I'll go into that a little bit more. And so let's just go into the first thing of the growing popularity of podcasting. Podcasting's not going anywhere. There's more and more podcasts added to Apple and Spotify every day, right? The trending is saying that there is more podcasting, more podcasts. And so podcasting is a powerful, powerful medium for communication, brand building, and storytelling, right? And so this is the medium, is podcasting. What is that vehicle to get to that medium? Does that make sense? What are you going to use? And that comes with software, hardware, Spotify, what website you're going to use, how you're going to distribute your podcast. And so we're going to talk a lot about that throughout this podcast, a show. Maybe not dive into that stuff exactly today, but I want to hit that first main point that the popularity of podcasts is still growing. I know that during like COVID, like 2020, 2021, it really took off because people were at home trying to figure out what to do. People were listening to more podcasts. There were more podcasts being produced, but there is a website called backlinko.com. And it kind of gives statistics of podcasts right now. And I'm just going to hit a few of these. There are over 546 million podcast listeners worldwide. So as of right now, 546 million worldwide. Well, there's 8 billion people. So there is still a ton of room for growth in the podcasting world. 47% of the US population over the age of 12 listen to a podcast at least once a month. So you have that. In 2024, worldwide podcast ad spending is estimated to hit $4.02 billion. Okay? So that comes into the money-making part of having a podcast, is getting ads, getting sponsors to sponsor your podcast. And so we'll go into that too throughout this journey of this show and my newsletter. Also, video podcasts are on the rise. It says with as many as 33% of US podcast listeners opting for watchable podcasts. Spotify allows you to do this. And now the other new place, not new because it's been around a while, but YouTube, right? YouTube is now the perfect place to post your video podcasts. And so, because obviously we know that YouTube has a huge reach, tons of people go to YouTube to search things. I know for my own self, I have searched YouTube in the last month of how to replace a garbage disposal and how to replace window balances in our windows. And so there are opportunities on YouTube to put your podcast, right? And it says here, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts lead the pack for global podcast dominance, which we know. And so, like I said, 546 million listeners as of right now, and it's only going to continue to grow, okay? It says in the U.S., an estimated 135 million consumers listened to a podcast in the last month. That is an increase from 120 million monthly in the U.S. in 2023. So again, everything is looking up and up when it comes to podcasting, right? And so podcasting is a huge part of people's lives. Like when people are driving, a lot of people listen to podcasts now when they're driving, right? When they're commuting somewhere. So that opportunity is there. Podcasts are still growing. And this is why one of the reasons I also think that everyone who has a business, entrepreneur, your brand, you should have a podcast because you are going to reach more people by having a podcast. And there's a couple of reasons that I'll go into about why having a podcast is important. The first one that I think and that I know will help you with social media posts is if you have a podcast and you're recording that podcast, especially video, if you record a 30-minute podcast about whatever your niche is, you're going to have 15 pieces of content to put out on social media, maybe more depending on what you talk about and how important those things are that you talk about and if they're adding value to your followers and listeners. Because there are websites out there that help you break those down using AI. So you can upload your entire 30-minute podcast into, there's one website called Opus Clip. You can take your 30-minute podcast, dump it into Opus Clip, and it will create social media snippets. And you can say if you want them 60 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute and a half, however long, and it will generate snippets of your podcast for you vertically so you can post them on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, wherever. So that is another one of the main huge reasons that your brand should have a podcast because social media is not going anywhere. More and more people are going to social media to look for things, search for things. And so I think it's huge opportunity right now for podcasting. And then I've kind of went into it, but the benefits of starting a podcast, right? I wrote down here, you can share potential advantages such as connecting with a global audience, right? Or if you want to just stick with your local audience, then talk about the town that your small business is in. It also helps you establish authority in your niche, whatever that niche is, whatever your job is, whatever your business is, right? And again, like I've kind of also mentioned, creating additional revenue streams, right? So you're going to get noticed if you're adding these clips to Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, wherever, you're going to get noticed more and more. And so just as an example, if you are a mortgage loan officer and your niche, what you help with are FHA loans, start a weekly or bi-monthly, like once every 2 weeks, podcast about FHA loans. And that's it. That's all you have to talk about are FHA loans because there are people out there who need FHA loans and people who are looking for information on FHA loans. Maybe you, as an MLO, a mortgage loan officer, you only cater and help people out who have lower credit scores. Talk about that. That's your niche. That's important to a handful of listeners and to your industry, right? Maybe you own a coffee shop and you're the only locally owned coffee shop, like it's the only one you have in a small town. Talk about why you started it and why you started it in this community and what you're hoping your coffee shop to become, and you can have guests come on your podcast, whether it's customers or your chef or your baristas, because all of those people also have different views and understandings of how the coffee shop works and that kind of thing. And so, like I said, it helps establish authority in your niche, right? Okay, the other thing, overcoming common fears and misconceptions. There's a lot of fears that people might have about starting a podcast. Like, how much is this going to cost me? How much time is this going to take? Is it really worth it, right? Are there technical challenges? Is the market too saturated? I doubt the market is too saturated, especially like I said, if you're a real estate agent in San Clemente, California, start a podcast. How many real estate agents in San Clemente have a podcast? I don't know the answer, but I bet it's not a lot. And so not only by you starting that podcast will have, your authority and knowledge on the San Clemente, California real estate market, but again, the video of your podcast can then turn into snippets and videos for social media, because I'm sure if you're a real estate agent, odds are you already have a social media following, you have a social media channel. This just adds more and more value to your followers because you've got more and more audio and video that you can add, okay? And like I said, I know that some of the holdbacks are it's too expensive, takes too much time. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I started looking at podcasting and doing it, it cost a lot of money. You had to host your podcast somewhere on a website. It wasn't as easy as it is now. And nowadays, you can start your podcast with just your phone. That's all it takes nowadays is your phone to start a podcast. iPhone, Android, it doesn't matter. You download the Spotify for Podcasters app. It formerly was called Anchor.fm, but now it is just Spotify for Podcasters. You download that app, you have a smartphone, you can record, edit, and post your podcast right there from your phone without spending any money because you already have the technology, the hardware, okay? And then you just use Spotify and there you go. And it can also, it'll post to Apple, and then you can also go ahead and post that to YouTube. And so they have made it super, super easy to start a podcast. It is way easier than it used to be. And so don't be scared. Don't be scared, because I guarantee you somebody in your office, somebody at your coffee shop that you own, somebody in your mortgage office, in your real estate office, your doctor's office, whatever it might be, they know how to do this. They can figure this out. If they're under the age of 30, then they can figure it out pretty easily. Do it. Start a podcast. Start a podcast. Don't be scared, because the other thing too, I think people get scared of and that they might fear is that they don't have enough to say. They don't have enough to talk about. I'm telling you right now that every single person listening to this, you could sit down and talk about what you're passionate about or what your job is. You could sit down with somebody and talk 30 minutes about that. And it's not like there's any act guide to how long a podcast can be. You want a podcast episode to be 10 minutes? Great. You want it to be an hour? Great. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Don't worry about that. Just get stuff out there. Get your story out there. No matter what you do as a job, no matter where you are in your career, you have a story to tell. You have a voice, right? You have enough to say. Like I said, if you are a mortgage loan officer who just does FHA loans, you could start a podcast. You could find somebody to sponsor that podcast, right? You will have listeners. If you are a real estate agent in San Clemente and your main thing is to help clients find homes between a certain price range, let's say of like $800,000 and $1.5 million, that's what you talk about. Like, you have it. You have a niche right there. Right there. If you have a coffee shop in a small town and it's the only coffee shop locally owned, meaning like it's not a chain, it's not part of a chain, you have a story. Why did you start this coffee shop? Who are you there for? Just the whole story, the whole background of your coffee shop, especially if it's in your town. Like, for instance, I'll just use San Clemente again. If you have a coffee shop that you open in San Clemente, I guarantee you can have a podcast where people from San Clemente in the local area will listen to that podcast because it has to do with where they live, their town. And the other thing then you can do, if you are that coffee shop owner, have guests on from the area. Have that real estate agent on that lives in San Clemente and is a real estate agent in San Clemente. Have somebody come on your podcast who is a barber in San Clemente. Like, it's a win-win for you and that person, right? People will get to know them. They'll get to know you. And more, that's just going to build, that's just going to build that authority and that likability, and will get more and more customers. I guarantee it. Because if you're posting that content of that podcast once a week, and then you take, let's just say you have a 30-minute podcast and you get only 7 pieces of content out of it, at least start there. 1 piece of content added a day to your social media channels, right? And then it can just keep snowballing from there and go further and further and further. So don't be scared to start a podcast. It's not as expensive as it used to be. You have a voice. You have enough to talk about, right? And if there are technical challenges, there is somebody to help you. Trust me, I figured most of this out on my own over the last however many years. And there's plenty of people out there who have podcasts who started it maybe with fears of not having enough to talk about, not knowing what technology to use. And so that's also why I am here for you, because I want to help you. Okay? I want to help add value to your podcast by just giving you this information, these tips, these tricks, the encouragement to do it, right? And please reach out to me. I will answer any questions you have at John W. Snyder on Twitter, Instagram. Hit me up, ask me about podcasting. Because like I mentioned earlier, this is what I want to do. I want to help you. And we all have something to talk about and something to add to the world, right? And so, yeah, even though this is about podcasting and this is mainly going to be about starting a podcast, but I did go into the social media side of things because that's a piece of it, right? And so you have that part of it too. Creating a podcast to then have pieces of material for social media, right? So we have that. Then the last thing is just what to expect from this podcast, which I've also, mentioned that this is a journey for me too. I know that I've kind of been all over the place on this first episode, and I apologize for that, but I'm also just excited about the opportunity for this and where this could go. And I just, not only if you're starting out a podcast for your business, just like I am doing for myself here, it's a journey, right? And so over this journey, I'm going to release one of these a week. Every Thursday, a new episode will come out, and I'm going to talk about just different topics, tools, tips, and strategies, in these different episodes to help you either launch your podcast or just keep going and sustaining that momentum you have with that podcast. And so back to the original question of why start a podcast, which I'm going to answer with why not. There's no better time than the present, right? And we are in a day and age in an era where you can seriously start a podcast for free. You can post on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube for free. It's free advertisement for your business. Is that going to stick around forever? I don't know, but take advantage of it while it is here for now. Take advantage of free advertising. And like I said, you can choose to do one a month. You can do a podcast once a month if you want to. You can do it once a week, once a day. There's people who put out podcasts every other day. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. But if you do one every 2 weeks, at least be consistent. Like say, I'm going to do a podcast every 2 weeks. It's going to come out on the 1st of the month and the 15th of the month. Just stay consistent for your brand and for your audience. Because if you're all over the place, your audience isn't going to know what to expect. And so for me, for this podcast and for my newsletter, like I said, I have a Podcast Playbook newsletter that gives you links and tips that comes out every Monday. It's free. This podcast, these episodes are going to come out every Thursday. It's free, right? And so that's where I'm at right now on my journey. I want to help you start a podcast. I want to help you sustain your podcast because I know over time I've quit doing my podcast. I went to school. I got my degree in broadcast journalism because I wanted to do sports journalism. I wanted to do sports reporting. And so long story short, I got sidetracked. I didn't go into sports journalism after college, but I did have a podcast and still kind of do have a podcast where I talk about sports. And so, but I want you to stay consistent, unlike I did over time, because consistency is key, right? Consistency is the key to make this successful. Okay. So why start a podcast? Because they're not going anywhere and it will add value to your audience and to your clients and your customers, right? It will help you establish your authority in whatever your niche is, like I talked about with mortgages or real estate or a coffee shop. Like, that's yours. And people will come to you for answers. They'll have questions about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you will have your podcast and all of those pieces of communication, pieces of content, that you can put out and about. Also, what to expect from this podcast. I am recording this podcast like it is live. So I will not be going back and editing this podcast and editing it out, because I want to get to a point where I'm live on YouTube and wherever else. And so by doing this and making it a routine and a discipline, you are going to get the raw and sometimes ugly side of what this journey looks like. And I just want to be open and honest about that, because podcasting is fun. It's great. You can make money doing it. Sometimes it's ugly and sometimes it's not, but I just want to be transparent, because if this is a podcast about podcasting, I want you to see all of it. I want you to see the journey that I'm going through as I develop this voice and become a guide for you and become the guide that you need to come to and want to come to get podcasting questions answered and just information, tips, tricks, that kind of thing. And so that's episode 1 of the Podcast Playbook. I know it was kind of all over the place, and it will tighten up as I continue to do this every week. And I'm now realizing, again, like I said, full transparency, I should have just stuck with one of those topics for this episode instead of 4. So why start a podcast? I should have just gone with, because it's popular and it's still growing. Here's why. But I didn't. So lesson learned. Again, perfect example. I just want to be honest and open with you about this journey, right? And so again, as we go on, I hope I can educate you and build excitement for your podcast, your brand, your business, whatever that might be, because you do have a voice, and your voice is important and your story is important, and people need to hear it. So start a podcast today. Let me know if you have any questions. I will put a link in notes for my social channels and the newsletter that you can sign up for. Thanks so much. See ya.